everybody. This is Bill Carlson with Café on Tampa. Today, we're excited to have the chief economist from the Florida Chamber Foundation, Jerry Parrish. Tell us about yourself, Jerry.
Hello, Bill. Great to see you again. I'm Dr. Jerry Parrish. I'm the chief economist and the director of research at the Florida Chamber Foundation. And we're part of the Florida Chamber. We're the 501c3. We're the nonprofit research group. And my job literally is to look 2 to 30 years in the future and come up with solutions for issues that Florida is having now and that Florida is going to have in the future. And really glad to be with everybody today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And I've known him for 10 or 15 years. We were just saying before he got on, the time flies way too fast. I'm on the board of Florida Tax Watch, where I first met him, and I'm also on his board for disclosure at Florida Chamber Foundation. And tell us real fast in your words what the Florida Chamber Foundation does.
Well, we do research, and that's literally it. We look and see what's happening to the economy, especially as my focus. But we also work on issues like intergenerational poverty. We're working on a lot of issues like education. And our job in a lot of cases is to gather the right people together to help the business community get involved and to help them understand what's going on in the ground, because we believe that it really, to solve some of these issues like intergenerational poverty, it takes business people, takes the nonprofits, the governmental agencies, and the philanthropic group all working together to make real progress in some of these things.
And the Florida Chamber, as probably everybody knows, is like a who's who of businesses around the state. It's a very good and prestigious organization. And they put together, I guess you're very involved in this, right? In organizing the Future Florida Forum in the fall. Hopefully we'll have one this fall. But it's like 3 days of everybody in the state who wants to try to set the agenda for the future of our state. Anybody who's watching Café con Tampa style, you're welcome to post messages either underneath or to the right of the video, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Jerry, tell us, okay, if I call you Jerry, I've known you so long.
Sure.
Dr. Parrish.
Everybody calls me Jerry.
And by the way, he shaved his beard from the ad, so if you don't recognize him, that's why. Tell us, please, what on a serious topic, tell us what's happening with the economy now and kind of what your forecasts are for the rest of the year.
Yeah, well, we've had this big shock to the economy that nobody could have forecast, and literally nobody did. It's been an immediate recession, that we've forced upon ourselves to try to deal with this disease, this COVID-19 virus that we're talking about. It's had a lot of effects on Florida. I've noticed there's been nearly 2 million initial unemployment claims, about 1.4 million or so we're getting close to are actually unique claims. Groups, states all over the country have been overwhelmed by the number of unemployment claims. We're all trying to get through all this together. We're actually waiting on the first actual job numbers from April. We'll get those on Friday, the 22nd, to really see what the damage has been as far as job-wise in the state. But we know this is going to have long-term effects. Some industries will come back online sooner than others, but we're studying that every day. And the Florida Chamber Foundation has been working on a recovery plan for about the last 7 weeks. So I'll be glad for people to ask questions about that. But it's something that's been, 12, 14 hours a day for most of us up here at the Chamber Foundation, and for some even more hours than that.
Sorry to cut you off. How's the state of Florida doing compared to the other top 5 largest states? Some of the smaller states I think had lower infection rates than the major states did. But how's Florida's economy doing compared to the other large states?
Well, one of the things that we've noticed is, as far as the virus, we haven't had such a hard time as states like New York and other ones out there. When you look at the path of the virus, looks like Florida did a really nice job as far as catching it in time. We were actually behind on the epidemiological curve than places like New York and other states out there. We know first case was back in January, the first confirmed case that we saw was over on the West Coast. And so we've actually been able to learn from other states and figure out what to do to try to minimize the amount of damage that we've been able to do to the economy. So Florida's actually in pretty good shape. I track on the floridascorecard.org every day. You get the number of cases, but really the number of cases isn't the important number. It's the average daily new cases that we're getting, because the number of cases for any state is a cumulative number. Somebody following these people around to take them off the list once they get well and go home if they were in the hospital, or just stay and get well. But we post that 14-day moving average of the average daily cases. Florida's right, below 700 cases a day, I believe, is the number right now.
And how many were we at the peak?
Good question. I could calculate that for you. It was a bunch, but remember, it's dependent on the number of tests that we're doing. I think yesterday they turned in more than 22,000 tests. So I think the real number that we should be looking at, and while we're talking here, I'm going to look it up on my phone just so I know. The real number is the average daily cases. So I'm going to give that to you here in just a second.
And do you feel, just your summary though, do you feel like confident that we're on the other side of the curve, and that we're like, how far down the other slope of the curve are we? Do you know?
Absolutely. We're on the downhill side right now. And we publish this every morning in a daily email that people can sign up for at thefloridachamber.com/coronavirus. 681.8 average daily cases for the entire state of Florida. But you got to remember as well, as in the southeastern three counties, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, they are actually responsible for about 58 or 59% of the total cases. They're just less than 30% of the whole population. So really, the rest of the state of Florida, the other 64 counties, have been sharing the 40% of all cases. And so in most parts of Florida, other than those three southeastern counties, the actual caseload has been fairly light. Certainly, we've not seen the hospitals run out of capacity or anything that we were all afraid of when we saw those big forecasts earlier. So the majority of Florida is doing really well.
Let me ask you our first question. If anybody else has a question, please post it underneath the feed if you're watching on your phone, or to the right if you're watching on your computer. First question is, do you anticipate any major long-lasting adverse impacts to the Florida economy due to the virus?
Major and long-lasting, yes, major. When you look at the economist forecast, every single one of them has the worst second quarter. That'll be April, May, and June that we've ever had, as far as one single quarter, as far as a drop in GDP and job losses and those kind of things. However, you got to understand that a lot of the industries are going to come back pretty quickly. Things like manufacturing, especially a lot of types of construction. You've seen an actual acceleration of construction projects like the I-4 corridor and a lot of things that we've been able to actually move up. But what you have to think about is the amount of leisure and hospitality jobs. Those aren't going to all come back soon. When I started speaking to our local chambers and groups around the state a few weeks ago, I told them to take a look at their percentage of private sector jobs that were leisure and hospitality jobs. That would be a proxy for how bad, are you above the state, level? Are you above the national level? That'd be a proxy on how much damage your economy would take. And certainly we don't expect 100% of those jobs to come back by the end of the year. It's going to take a vaccine probably until we get back to 100% on our tourism numbers. Remember, that's a lot of state and local tax revenue.
Statewide, how big is the hospitality industry?
I believe it's about either 1.4 million jobs, I believe, in the total leisure and hospitality. It's at least 1.2 million. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. But remember, that's not just tourism. That's you taking your family out to eat locally, or going to some other part of Florida and staying in a hotel and going to the beach or going to some theme park. So some of that's coming back now. Us as Floridians going out, especially now that they're open up to 50% starting today. But it is still a lot of jobs, and even if 10% of that group is out of work for more than 6 or 8 or 9 months, you're talking about more than 100,000 people losing their job for a substantial amount of time, and
What do you
that
think will happen?
easily could happen.
Is there any way to predict, will people shift to other industries, or will they move to another state? Any predictions on that?
Yeah, I think there's a great opportunity for Florida here. Maybe there's people out there that decide they want to change industries. One great opportunity is for them to go to one of our 28 state colleges or go to university. They can go get a certification, start working on a degree, maybe finish, their degree that they had started a while back. I think you'll see a lot of people be in the situation. I'm not going to get myself into that situation where I'm dependent on this industry. I'm going to try something else. And what's cool about it is, I looked a lot at manufacturing. One of the top 2 places that manufacturers are hiring are in retail and leisure and hospitality. They're getting people who already have, job skills, especially, the soft skills, the employability skills is what we call them. They've already gotten those in their training. And it's actually easier to take somebody with those kind of skills and help them get a technical skill than it is to do it the other way around. So, we had nearly 400,000 jobs open in Florida before this hit. There's certainly an opportunity for a lot of people to go back and get some training and, find a job or just one that's currently open right now. There's quite a few jobs open in Florida now.
Let me ask you a basic economics question. So when I first learned economics a long, long time ago, there was a thing called the natural rate of unemployment, and it was like 5.5%, and we were down around 3%. Is there no natural rate of unemployment anymore, or were we pushing past it?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And so I'll put on my professor hat for a minute. I teach part-time at Florida State University. I teach in the Master's in Applied Economics program, and this is a subject of much discussion. In the old days, once you got around 5% or so of unemployment, heading below that rate, typically wages went up very quickly. And so you'd have some inflation that was induced. And so there got to be this thought of the natural rate of unemployment is about 5%. However, times are different now. And I think we were down to 2.8% in the state of Florida back around February. So we were in some counties. I can't remember what the state rate was, but it was certainly well below 5%. Maybe it was 3.8%. But we kept seeing more and more people get hired. You got to remember, though, an unemployment rate doesn't count people that are out of the workforce and not looking for work. So, it's a metric that, is not a perfect metric when we're looking at things like that.
We've got a couple other questions, and just a reminder to anybody, if you have any questions, post underneath the feed or to the right, depending on where you're looking at it. And also, we Café on Tampa hold programs like this, and people like Dr. Parrish are generous enough to give us their time because they want this information to be widely spread, that we want the public to gain access to it. So please, if you're watching now or watching later, please share it on your Facebook feed so your friends and family can watch it. We want as many people as possible to watch it. And if you haven't already, like our Facebook page. Next question. What are we doing to lessen our reliance on service industry jobs?
Yeah, that's a really great question because in the process, a couple of years ago, the Florida Chamber Foundation embarked on this great journey of coming up with a strategic plan for the state of Florida. And it's something the Chamber Foundation had been doing about every 10 years before. People out there listening may have heard of the Cornerstone reports. This past one was called Florida 2030. And it literally was a privately funded look at the state of Florida to where we need to be by 2030. And one of the things that we looked at was diversifying our economy, and diversifying away from, not diversifying away, but improving the number of people, increasing the number of people that were working in those jobs that are, diversify Florida's economy and pay high wages. One of the true ones there is manufacturing. And so what our goal we set, and there's 39 goals in this report. One of our goals is we wanted to be one of the top 5 states in manufacturing in the entire country. But right now, Florida is about 12th. But what manufacturing does is it gives us an opportunity to diversify our economy. But also, one of the things we think about is about half of the trains, planes, trucks, and ships leave Florida empty. They bring in consumer goods, but they leave empty. So when you're looking at hauling freight to Florida, it's more expensive to bring something here because the probability of your container leaving empty is higher. If we could take manufactured goods and put in those trains, planes, trucks, and ships, then our inbound freight rates would come down, and Florida's consumers would pay less. Florida's businesses would pay less and be more competitive. So I really think manufacturing is one of the great opportunities that we have. And one of the other opportunities, because of this virus, you can easily see medical goods. We've got a bunch of medical manufacturing in the state of Florida, especially pretty sophisticated medical devices. Now, I don't think we're going to end up in a situation in the future. We're going to let ourselves end up where we're dependent on some foreign country for drugs, for medical supplies, for personal protective apparel. I believe you're going to see a lot of opportunities for Florida manufacturers to start building that here in the state of Florida for us to be ready in case this thing flares up again or in case we have another event like this in the future.
Yeah, I think we have like 400 just in this in the Tampa area, mostly in Pinellas County. Let me ask you another question we just got. Given that property tax increases were capped by the state to curb dramatic decreases in those revenues in a recession, how might property tax receipts be impacted this time around as compared to during the Great Recession?
That's a really good question, and I got the opportunity to be on a panel with a bunch of commercial real estate guys not far from Tampa not long ago. I think the prevailing sentiment here is we're not going to have a substantial reduction in property values like we did during the Great Recession. I'm pretty confident in saying that. Certainly, we're going to have some distress sales, people that have lost their jobs. But I don't really think you're going to end up in that same situation where you have the property devalued. So and you're doing the catch up from that program, the Save Our Homes Amendment, I think is what they're talking about here.
Is there any way to predict the indirect impact on commercial real estate? We know that now that people are working from home, a lot of people don't want to go back to the office. So is there any modeling that's being done to try to predict how much space companies will need in the future?
You can bet the commercial real estate folks are doing it. They do tell me that there's an offset to that, though. Certainly, I've been working from home up until today. We showed back up at the office. I would prefer to work from home. But you got to remember there's also an offset that now if we have to socially distance from each other, that in some companies where you literally have to be there, you may end up needing more commercial space. But yeah, there's certainly companies that they can take a third or a half or, who knows, even more of their employees and work remotely. This new technology that we're using today has made that possible. And I think it's great. It saves a lot of commuting time. I really think one of the beneficiaries of this whole thing is going to be our rural counties. That people, now that we figured out a lot of people can work from home, I think you're going to see a lot of people move to a less dense area. And so I think maybe Florida's rural counties are actually going to finally win one here.
Yeah, there definitely is an outdoor lifestyle that people love, and you're not as. I'm wondering how this all will affect downtowns. With the density downside. Let me get to another question. Going back to diversifying our economy more into manufacturing, should we start offering incentives to companies, or what would be a route to quickly attract these types of businesses or expand our current ones?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I'm going to be super blunt with you. I like the incentive programs because I know what the value of a job is to the state of Florida. Over the past 4 years, we've really, some of our legislators have really vilified this economic development process, and I think they're doing the wrong thing. First of all, the more diversified we were before the COVID hit, the better off we're going to be. And you may realize that we post this on the Florida scorecard all the time. Florida's the 20th most industry diverse economy in the country right now. And the Tampa Bay MSA is number 8. So actually, Tampa Bay MSA is more industry diverse than the United States as a whole. And most people maybe not think about that. But incentives are a pretty low cost way to get companies' attention to move into the area. And I believe Florida has made a ton of money. Certainly, when you consider the value of a job, most jobs are worth $8,000 to $10,000 a year in state tax revenues. Paying a company $3,000 a job is a very easy thing for me to get my head around for those that qualify in just those industries. But
Yeah. Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
I saw a memo the other day that said that QTI was discontinued. I had missed that if that happened. Can you tell me what happened with that?
Yeah, the legislature this past year, it was due to sunset, and a lot of groups like the Florida Chamber tried to get it renewed, but the Florida legislature would not go along with that. So there is no more QTI program for the state of Florida. And I think,
can you just quickly explain to people what it is as opposed to other kinds
okay.
of?
Great. Okay, that's the Qualified Target Industry Program. If you qualify for one of these target industries, the legislature came up with a list of industries that provide high wage jobs and diversify the economy, exactly what we were talking about. I think there were 8 of them, including manufacturing, aviation and aerospace, life sciences, corporate headquarters, a few of those. It's not leisure and hospitality. It's not some of the other ones. But if you qualified for that and created more than 10 jobs at a time, you could qualify to get a bonus from the state in the form of a tax. There's $3,000 per job, that you didn't have to pay in taxes. You could use it to your other taxes.
The one thing I liked about that program too is that you were forced by the state to submit your numbers. So many incentives, they don't even, once they get them, they don't have to verify that they even got all the numbers. Let me ask you a question in the last few minutes. So I have a son who's 18, is going to FSU, maybe in one of your classes in the next couple of years. But a lot of us watching have kids that are going to be going to college or have grandkids that are going to college. If you look out 10 or 20 years, what are the careers of the future, and what should our kids be studying to make sure that they're competitive? And in particular, in some of these other programs we've been talking about, software robots taking over white collar jobs, like what can kids study these days to make sure that they don't become redundant in 10 or 20 years?
That's a great question, and I have to deal with that with a lot of parents who called me and asked me, that same thing. I really like the analytical stuff. I like, and I go over to FSU every year and speak to the undergrads that are studying economics, and they ask me the same thing. So what I tell them to do is get as much quantitative stuff as they can take, as much statistics and those kind of things, because there will always be a demand for that. I believe that those folks that really take a broad look at and maybe study some things that you wouldn't think would be important. But I like history, and I used to like to hire history majors, and even to run a warehouse, because history majors think linearly. If a problem comes up, they look back in history and say, hey, did this ever come up before? What did they do to solve it? So I think any of those kind of things where you're analyzing something, it can be accounting. There's always going to be demand for that. nursing, Florida is no way prepared to, produce as many nurses as we need. I believe there will always be a super high demand for nurses. But I think studying management is a good way. We have to have company leaders that are going to lead these companies of the future. But what I tell everybody is exactly what they told me. I went to get a PhD. I was 33 years old. I went back to school, and they were real blunt with me. And they said, hey, your PhD is only good for about 7 years. You're going to have to be retrained after that. So I think anything that anybody studies now, we're going to have to realize that as adults, we're going to have to go back and, gain new skills, gain those skills for the technology that's going to change. And I believe everybody's going to be forced to do that, including me at my age of 59. I still have to learn new things. I have to learn new stuff to teach my grad students. But I think any of those would be good. However, I think anybody who's a really bright person who will show up at their job and really try hard and maybe show up a little early is really going to do well. I think there's still this personal element out there that no matter what skills you work the hardest are going to be the ones that get promoted the quickest. And I've seen that over years and years. I spent about 20 years in the private sector. And I still believe that's true.
What do you, so my final question, unless somebody else has another question. So you did the Florida 2030 plan, and you've done some forecasting since then. If you could look out 10 or 20 years, what do you think are the growth sectors in the world? Like if you had to bet on a company, not that you don't have to mention specific companies, but if you had to bet on a company in an industry, what industries do you think are the ones that are really going to grow and be the cornerstones of Florida's economy 10 or 20 years from now?
That's a great question. And we were fortunate, right around the time we started Florida 2030 project, we got some funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to study this exact thing. And so we produced a report called Florida Jobs 2030. You can Google it. It's on the Florida Chamber website. But we picked 5 industries that were not only expected to grow and produce good high-wage jobs for Floridians, it also produced opportunities for people with certifications and associate's degrees and high school degrees. And those are things like aviation and aerospace, trade and logistics, manufacturing was one of them, life sciences was another. And those industries certainly have opportunity for growth in the state of Florida. But more importantly, it gives people, no matter when you want to, I look at it this way, you don't go to school and then finish school and then go to work. In this upcoming economy, I think what you'll do is you'll get some training or a certification, you'll go into the job market, and then you'll go back and get more training. So they call it a career lattice or a career ladder. I think those industries are certainly primed to be opportunities in the future. And, with Florida aging like it is, the life sciences, not just nursing and hospital care and being a doctor and those kind of things, but, the drug companies and all those things that go with it, I think you could probably not miss by going into that industry.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And for anybody watching, thanks for watching. If you sign on late, please like our Facebook page, Café con Tampa, and go to the YouTube and like or subscribe to our YouTube page. Please, we're trying to build that. And if you haven't already, please share this on your Facebook page with your friends and family, because Dr. Parrish and we would like to get this information out as broadly as possible to everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Parrish. Would you like to say anything else? And please mention your websites and stuff so people can find them.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me. You can find the scorecard at thefloridascorecard.org. And there's a little click down box on the top right that will let you pull down your county. There's hundreds of thousands of pieces of data, not just on the disease, but tax receipts and the number of manufacturing jobs, including the number of kids living in poverty in your county, and all kind of things if you'll click through that. But you can also, there's one button on there if you want to contact me. There's a button on the Florida scorecard that says contact us. Any message you want to type into that comes directly into my inbox. And if you got questions, please feel free to ask me. I get some very unique questions, but I'm always glad to answer them. But thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you so much again. And thanks everybody for watching. Talk to you later.